Let's give it a try. First group, here we go. One. Ready, go. Before I dive into Dogfight, I want to play a song that I understand was performed right here last night. It's a great, great song, and I think it's a great way to start looking at Pasek and Paul and how incredibly diverse their music is and how incredible in 12, 13 years they have put together so many great shows. Christmas Story, James and the Giant Peach, of course, Dear Evan Hansen, and Dogfight, but also the movie The Greatest Showman, and that's what the song is from. And it's one of my favorite songs, has the greatest lyrics, and of course the lyrics are so important for Pasek and Paul. I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, because we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. No one will love you as you are. Later on, I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me.
This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me.
An electrifying song. It's a classic I Am, Take a Stand song. It unites the community in this story, and it electrifies the audience. Though in a very different way, I connect a little bit the core purpose of that song in The Greatest Showman to a very different song, but equally strong song. And it's interestingly, it's the title song of this show. It's the one song of the character of Marcy, and it's Dogfight. We're going to listen to it later. It's strong and bold, and it's a turning point in this story. So, this is a very challenging and emotional story. The big context looming in the backdrop of this plot is the Vietnam War. The war that changed America in profound ways. Dogfight begins, as Cindy mentioned, in 1967 and flashes back to 1963. In 1963, most Americans didn't know much about what was going on in Vietnam. That included a group of 6 Marines in this story who are about to be shipped out to Okinawa in the South Pacific and then become military advisors in South Vietnam as part of the civil war between the North and the South. By 1967, however, all Americans knew about Vietnam. They not only knew about Vietnam, but they had strong opinions about it. Many lives had already been lost in a war that would continue for 6 more years. Also, many Americans were against the war in Vietnam. And returning vets whose fathers had come home as heroes from earlier wars came back to a country that was indifferent to them, treated them poorly, and even disdained them. Most of Dogfight takes place in 1963 as a flashback. The beginning and end, bookends, as it were, are the 1967 bits, when Sergeant Eddie Birdlace returns to San Francisco in 1967 and to a hostile nation. War has changed him. He has PTSD. He's going to see a girl, Rose. He only knew for a few strange hours, years ago. And why is he going back to see her? That is an important question to ask. The very end of the story. That sound of blended voices, the ensemble of voices, which ends the show, also begins the show. Same music, same time period, same event. Eddie coming back. The sound of that guitar, that acoustic guitar, is very important for Dogfight. It's the sound of the era. It's the sound of Rose's heroes, all of the folk singers. And it's the kind of playing that is reminiscent of, I would say, more of a 70s or late 60s kind of a sound. This show also has early 60s sounds, right? Like what we were doing earlier with the doo-doos. And hey, Meg, how are you? It's nice to see you. Didn't see you. Yeah. And also, what I would say of their style is they have a kind of spontaneous and wonderful theatricality and an immediacy, and they can do with a song, both make it a song that you remember, but also a song that moves the story forward and deepens the characters. And their lyrics add to the character and the depth that we understand that character. And that's really key. And of course, it would be hard to say that Pasek and Paul were not influenced by Stephen Sondheim, who's basically influenced every songwriter of the 21st century who writes musical theater. And it's hard not to hear that his influence in this show. So we're talking about the beginning of the show, and that music we were just listening to, it's kind of melancholy and ambiguous in some ways. We're not really quite sure, feeling good, feeling bad. There's a quality that really fits Eddie, his situation, and in some ways, a bigger way, the situation of all returning vets who have a kind of a sadness that they can't put this thing behind because they're not, part of the process is not completed for them. They're supposed to return home and be thanked for doing what they did, which is sacrifice themselves more than anybody could possibly imagine. This all is a very challenging kind of story for our musical. And an ending that's melancholy like this is not exactly like Broadway Lights. It's a kind of an intimacy to it. But Pasek and Paul are very equal to this complexity and subtlety of this. So we have these wonderful chords. And our first song, Take Me Back, begins with feelings of loss and hope. Some kind of times are real quick to leave you. Some kinds of time you can't dream away. Some kinds of time are set to deceive you. Some kinds of time repeat and replay. These lines are so full of so much meaning. The idea of things that you wish you could get out of your head, but you can't. Some kinds of time just won't stop hounding you. And that's sort of PTSD. That's lots of things. And yet it's being delivered through our sort of master storyteller, Rose, who starts this as a folk singer telling us a story. And hope, you know, she talks about the smells, a sound can take you back. Oh, take me back. A smell, a sound, a memory you found can take you back. Oh, take me back. I love their harmonies. They have a great sense of harmony, not only inside a chord progression, but also it's always fresh. They're always moving keys. They're not like stuck in one key for forever and ever. It's always moving and fluid. Okay, so from this sort of melancholy 1967 beginning, we're jolted into 1963. We're on a bus headed for San Francisco with 6 Marines planning their final night on American soil before being sent overseas. They are pumped, young, competitive, aggressive, determined to have a blowout kind of a night, right? They are also blind, unaware, dangerous to some people, and somehow amidst all of that, likable. And they say, we're going to run the streets and find some trouble. One last night, we don't forget. Drink so deep we're seeing double. One last night with no regret. Anything goes, sloppy and boozing, cruising. And another adding verse that tells us about where they've been and now how they view their life in a new way after 13 weeks of boot camp. A band of brothers you've been given. Pride you never thought you'd feel. The shitty life that you were living barely seems like it was real. So much for their hometowns. They're ready, they're completely brainwashed into where they're going and who they now are in a short boot camp. Because when it gets rough, your buddies will pull you through. It's that bond of brothers. You get that and more when you join the Corps. It's Marine stuff. You're in store for some kind of time. By the way, my father was a Marine, and I think Jerry was a Marine. Was Jerry a Marine, or he was in the Vietnam War?
He wasn't in the war.
Ah.
That's another story.
Okay, yeah. Well, my father wasn't in Vietnam. He was in World War II. So, and then we get to this wonderful chorus, and it's so like some kinds of time, where we had some kinds of time, right? Now we got some kind of time. Don't think it through, because your gut will tell you what you gotta do. Some kind of time. This is important. Cut all your strings, we'll be kings for an evening. Don't you miss out on some kind of time. And it builds and builds and builds and gets us into the last. The whole damn town is ours tomorrow. Nothing standing in our way. The whole damn world is changed tomorrow. So we go corporate today. Making it, taking the one shot we got. You just don't know where the night might go. It's to JFK in the USA. Some kind of time, taking you on. With a wham bam, thank you ma'am, you boys have grown. Some kind of time, cut all our strings, we'll be kings for an evening. What do you say to some kind of time? Let's listen to the boys do it.
Gotta go find out, leave it behind us, gonna be having some kind of time.
What is their idea of fun? That's, of course, where the title comes from. It could also mean, like I told my next door neighbor, it refers to war, because dogfight is often what you have, a sort of skirmish between planes in a dogfight. All kinds of things like that. But here it certainly is not that. Mainly it belongs to this, that each is putting in $50 into a pot for a competition that one will win. What are they going to do? They're going to comb the streets. They're going to find and bring a date to a club. And they're going to parade her onto the dance floor. And when a covert panel of judges decides which woman is the ugliest, that's the dogfight. So they just stopped being likable. And here lies the tension inside this story, because what they're doing is just not acceptable. But the way they do it, right? And yet we can't help liking them in some ways. And so there is that tension, which makes a good story. What they're doing really sucks. And yet we can't help being drawn into their energy. Like with this song, when they all head out onto the street and start looking for their dates. Get ready, ladies. Here we go. Hey, good looking, you're so out of sight. Hey, good looking, what you doing tonight? Hey, good looking, how's about a date? Hey, good looking, pick you up at 8. Hey, 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 good looking, what's a guy to do? Say, good looking, search the whole world through. I've been looking for you. There's 6 of them. The main 3 are the 3 Bs: Birdlace, Boland, and Bernstein. They're the 3 Bs, and they're joined by Stevens, Gibbs, and Fector. Gents, for you to know this, of course, the sound of the tight harmony is absolutely essential to this show. I'm thinking of it this way, that they're all marked as tenors, but I think two of them are lower, and those are Boland and Fector, and the higher ones are Bernstein, Birdlace, definitely first tenors, Stevens, and Gibbs. So there's four-part harmony at various places. So talking about this tension about schmucks and Marines, right? Multiply that by about 10 when it comes time for us to get to know Eddie Birdlace. Because, he's supposed to be the hero of the story, right? So what happens here in the first scene, where he is out trying to find a date, time is getting really tight, and he's walked into a diner. And he's hearing a young woman singing in this diner, and her name is Rose, and she's a waitress, and her mom owns the diner, and she loves, as Cindy mentioned, she loves folk singers. She loves the great folk singers of the era, and she emulates them and wants to someday be a songwriter herself. But Eddie looks at her and decides to invite her to a party. Well, you know my middle birthday now, show you my middle name. See, I'm an open book, have a look. This ain't no pickup game. I heard your pretty voice, then we saw eye to eye on all that music stuff, not on fluff. We didn't have to try. Now isn't that rare? That kind of connection. So why not come to a party with me? Why not come to a party? A five-piece band, I'll take your hand, Rose, and twirl you around. Buy you a drink, don't stop to think, say yes. Come to a party with me. Just say yes. So he's charming. And he just seems like a, good old American boy, right? A little later in the song, Rose, who's very young, right? She's inexperienced. She's kind of bowled over by this invitation. She wants to say yes, but she's very hesitant. She says no. He persists, and this is how it goes.
Eddie, wait. I'm going with you, okay? Just let me run upstairs and change.
Okay.
Okay.
What a gem. What a pick and a pinch. What a girl for this party. You'll waltz her in. You're set to win once you twirl her around. She'll be a smash.
From this point of creepy schmuckdom, Eddie's journey towards redeemability begins. Some of his redeeming qualities are that he knows shame. And so it's being ashamed that leads him further into the story where he changes. Meanwhile, up in her room, Rose is throwing around every outfit that she owns. I'm sure it ends up on the floor. She's so excited. She's so green and inexperienced. She's so sweet and dear, so believable, so real. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, holy cow, what to wear and your hair, what a mess, pick a dress. Oh my God, are you mourning a death? Take a breath, what a look, I mistook you for butternut squash. Oh my gosh. Keep it soft, keep it bright, be a girl, something pink, don't you think? Just a touch, not too much, he likes you. Just be you, he won't care what you wear, I don't care. Should it go with the pink or the blue? What to do? For someone who is nothing short of wonderful, nothing short of wonderful. Love this song. And that's certainly, you hear the Sondheim coming out in that, right? They're so talented because each of the verses takes the story further. They're never the same. It's always moving. It's great. Rose and Eddie obviously are the two main roles of this story. They each have quite a few songs. Eddie's a tenor, high tenor. Rose is mezzo soprano. Okay, so now we're ready for the big scene in Act One. Obviously, it's the scene in the club, right? Where the dogfight's going to happen. A 60s lounge singer, which I think is a terrific role, has 3 songs. He's maybe not the most tasteful of singers, you know. His first song is in a kind of early 60s thing. They even write here, I saw her standing there, kind of a tempo, like the Beatles song. So, you know, it's called Blast Off. The next song that is the critical song of this whole thing is that it's called That Face, and it's the song during which the dogfight competition takes place, and I'm going to just play it for you off the recording. What's interesting about it is the song has a kind of a sort of Latin lover feel to it. And at the same time the song is going on, the lounge singer's doing his thing, we're really seeing all this play out on the dance floor. All the scenes, the real ugliness of what's going on, the women not really knowing, the men doing what they're doing, having a good time, right?
With a sweet embrace, when I see that face.
Rose is so upset by all of this that's going on. I mean, she still doesn't really know what's going on, but it's something about it is so upsetting her. She goes to the ladies' room and throws up. Simultaneously, Marcy is having a fight with Boland, who was her date, who made an agreement with her to share half of the proceeds because she won, right? And he's trying to cheat her out of her money. And she's having none of it, as you mentioned, right? She's good businesswoman, right? She's a prostitute, but she is so pivotal here because she's now very pissed, and we're pissed because we saw this whole thing happening, right? So we're really on her side, and we're really ready for the dogfight song. So some little prick with a knob for a dick is gonna get you down. Please, boys are the same and they all got a game. So full of shit, your eyes turn brown. Don't expect nothing, that's how they're made. 'Cause 2 sweaty balls means a lush and a rush to get laid. See, if I'm getting screwed, at least I'm getting paid. At the dogfight in the ring. Gotta learn it, face it, hear it, a ding, ding, ding. They're only paid when the load is blown, so you and stay till you get your bone at the dogfight. So later on, Rose is hearing this. She's telling this to Rose, and so this is Rose's education here at this moment, to learn something about a very harsh world, for which Marcy is the sort of the teacher, and she's teaching Rose something which she's not going to take on entirely, but it is the very beginning of Rose's journey that's so interesting here, and this duet between these 2 women is the final section of the title song, Dogfight.
Happy this is how the world works. I'm either gonna get.
Well, this is the absolute dramatic high point of the first act. It's the song before the end, and it certainly sets us in a new direction. And that's really what a great song at this point in the show does. But the last song of Act One is very different than this. And I think it's really one of the best songs in the show. 2 words, pretty and funny, right? Pretty funny, right? We could say that as a phrase. But what Pasek and Paul really explore in this song through the psychology of Rose, the pain that she is now in, is that to separate the meaning of those 2 words and as to be different things about things she feels about herself, things that she feels about what's happened. It's masterful. And the style of this song is a kind of a country style, which Pasek and Paul talk a lot about. Country music has a big influence on them. They believe the country songwriters are great storytellers, which I do too. And they are great storytellers. So they pick up on that. In this song, it has a wonderful feel to it. Close the windows, draw the curtain, hide the bright lights of the moon, hang the dresses, ugly dresses. No one likes maroon. Wipe off all that stupid lipstick. Return the earrings to the case. Makeup won't make any difference. It's still the same old face. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny you believe that it was real? Pretty funny. Let's listen to Lindsay Mendez sing a little bit of this.
He convinced me I could be pretty funny.
So the real question as Act One ends, and this is where we're going to end too, the real question is what's going to happen, really? There really doesn't have to be an Act Two in a way, because it's very feasible that Eddie and Rose could never see each other again. And yet his shame draws him back to her, and their experience in the rest of that night changes him enough that 4 years later he comes back and changes her greatly as well. And in some ways we see her work through, and we feel like she's had some victory at the end of this story. Well, thank you all very much for coming today, and we'd love to take any questions if anyone has any.
Isn't it funny?